The words of reflection this morning were composed by Marnie Harmony. If we do not venture out, if on a starlit night with the moon brightly shimmering, we stay inside and do not venture out, the evening universe remains a part of life we shall not know. If on a cloudy day with grayness infusing all and rain dancing rivers in the grass, we stay inside and do not venture out, the stormy, threatening energy of the universe remains a part of life we shall not know. If on a frosty morning, dreading the chilling air before the sunrise, we stay inside and do not venture out, the awesome cold, quiet, and stillness of the dawn universe remains a part of life we shall not know. If throughout these grace-given days of ours, surrounded as we are by green life and brown death, hot pink joy, and cold gray pain and miracles, always miracles, if we stay inside ourselves and do not venture out, then the fullness of the universe shall be unknown to us, and our locked hearts shall never feel the rush of worship. Please remain seated, and we will have our meditation hymn of 374, Since What We Choose is What We Are.
After graduating from one of our Unitarian Universalist theological schools, Meadville Lombard, I returned to take some courses toward the Doctor of Ministry. They canceled the program before I actually signed up, so it's a good thing I wasn't totally committed to that degree. But while I was there, I took a course from Dr. William Murry, who was the president and academic dean of Meadville Lombard from 1997 to 2003. And I knew him while I was a student, and then afterwards when I returned to take some of the DMin courses, and also because I served on various committees at the school. Unfortunately, Bill passed away in 2017, and Unitarian Universalism lost a great minister, a really fine person, and a tremendous resource for religious humanism. It's possible that some of you may have read one or more of his books, A Faith for All Seasons, Liberal Religion and the Crisis of Life, Reason and Reverence, Religious Humanism for the 21st Century, and Becoming More Fully Human, Religious Humanism as a Way of Life. He was also co-editor with Unitarian Universalist minister Dr. Kendall Gibbons of Humanist Voices in Unitarian Universalism. So if you haven't read any of those books, you might want to look for them. Bill's work always reminds me of our relationship to one another and to our environment, to all that exists, actually, of our covenant to encourage one another in spiritual growth and in the free and responsible search for truth and meaning, words extracted from our purposes and principles. We usually talk about our interdependence when we want to emphasize our role as stewards of the earth, something I doubt we could overemphasize at the moment. Another way to talk about interdependence is the way in which people are in relationship to one another. Not only are we stewards of material and physical resources, we are also accountable for the quality of our relationships with people we know and with people that we don't know. At the moment, the world scene is playing out with relationships that exist around power, which is another sermon all by itself, especially power in relationships where someone is considered other. Today, I'll mostly be talking about relationships between people who feel some kinship toward one another, most specifically Unitarian Universalists, because we're drawn together by certain values and principles. And what I have observed is that sometimes the values and principles, which start out as abstract concepts, when articulated, become so concrete that we forget they have interpretive value. When that happens, and because we are connected in this invisible web, we may begin to feel some tension on the web. I see it sometimes in the way we refer so often to the affirmation of inherent worth and dignity in every person, as if it was intended to mean everyone is entitled to do exactly as they please without regard to the network of relationships. Because each of us is affected by our own actions and the actions of others. And so that particular principle has become known in UU circles as, or referred to as, the tyranny of the first principle. It has allowed us to sometimes accept boundaryless or even destructive behavior on the part of some individuals because we've come to believe that we have to treat everyone as if all behavior is okay because everyone has inherent worth and dignity. Actually, though, that is the opposite of encouraging people to spiritual growth, to a mature spirituality and a mature way of being human. Today, there's tension on the web. Oddly enough, though, tension is what holds a web together. Too much, though, and the web tears apart. Not enough, and the middle will fall out. The tension that we're experiencing now in our UU world is around our history or perceived history of white male privilege. If you're reading the World and different publications, you're certainly reading about that. Another tension that we have had for a long time has been around ritual. And growing up in Unitarian Universalist churches, I'm aware of the intentional avoidance sometimes of what can be considered meaningless ritual, especially a long time ago when my parents were coming into Unitarian Universalist churches. That was something that people were certainly getting away from. It turned out that in a lot of our congregation then there was absolutely nothing that resembled anything like church. And after a while, people began to feel like something was missing. Probably, if you think back to the beginnings of this congregation, it might have been like a lot of other congregations in the South that were started around universities and university towns. Basically, it was a lecture and coffee. And that's how it was in Tuscaloosa when I was there, around the time I was in college. And then some of us started talking about having an order of service and maybe tossing in a hymn or two. And luckily, that was accepted graciously. And after a few years, I have no idea if it had anything to do with that or not, but the church began to grow, and they moved out of the space they had been renting, bought property, and built a church. What we began to observe in generations of people raised without church or in congregations that tried hard not to look like church is that without the symbols and stories of a religious heritage, a significant number of individuals began to feel that something was missing, yet not necessarily an understanding that through the use of appropriate ritual, there are times when making the abstract concrete is useful. The sense that something is missing is still leading people to seek religious or spiritual community and to experiment, often from scratch, with ways to use ritual. So then we get a tension between the abstract and the concrete. and also between old and new, or traditional and contemporary. It's like allergic reactions. You have to be exposed to something to develop a reaction to it. And once you develop an allergy, every time you come in contact with that substance, you will have a reaction. If you manage to escape overexposure long enough to develop antibodies, then you may not have symptoms. It's like poison ivy. You know, some people can just roll in that stuff and never itch. Dr. Murry also supported a point that a lot of religious educators have been talking about for a long time. It seemed to us that people raised by parents who had left behind the religion of their childhood and gravitated possibly toward Unitarian Universalism or possibly no church at all, that they were raising a generation of people who not only had nothing to leave behind, but nothing to hold on to either. In Reason and Reverence, his book about religious humanism for the 21st century, Bill Murry suggests that a new humanism for the 21st century must take into account a resurgence of interest in religion occurring among people who have no religious background and no commitment to the traditional religions. This is the group that accounts for the large percentage of people referred to as the nones that you hear a lot about. It isn't that they necessarily choose to have no religion or that they are denying any desire to have religion or are opposed to it. They just don't have a religion to claim because they don't have one. And when they go someplace where they have to check the box of what is your religion, then they check the box that says none. That's where that came from. It didn't really have anything to do with any conscious decisions about that. It was a place where people have been extrapolating a lot of data. Extrapolating. I think that's a word that means jumping to conclusions. If religious humanism is to be a viable alternative for these people, writes Murray, I believe it must develop and embrace a non-theistic understanding of spirituality and a meaningful concept of religion. On that I agree. Because many people are seeking a religious perspective that incorporates the discoveries of modern science, this is also what he says, but turns away from stories, myths, and symbols that for them have lost their power. The rate of advance in scientific knowledge causes us to continually rethink our relationships and our place in the interdependent web, and keeps this in the forefront of our thinking. The moral and ethical dilemmas that are shaped by the world we live in shape the way we think and respond. It's difficult to separate our moral and ethical thinking from the part of us that responds to life with reverence and awe. It is here that we enter the religious or spiritual dimension of existence. Reverend Sean Parker Dennison, UU minister, writes, "The ability to see beauty is the beginning of our moral sensibility. What we believe is beautiful, we will not wantonly destroy." And Reverend Mary Catherine Morn writes, "Beauty does more than awaken us. It also admonishes us. It demands something. We are here so that together we might heed the admonitions of beauty, answer its call to create, protect, and preserve." I thought about this as I was watching the news when the Cathedral Notre Dame was burning. My Facebook was filling up with people posting pictures of when they had been there. I had been there a year or so before, and I understood, I thought, what people were feeling. When you experience something beautiful, it becomes a part of you. Money was pouring in from all over to rebuild and preserve this historic piece of art, this beautiful cathedral. I think people come here for beauty. This space is beautiful. The music is beautiful. I think it's something that we live for, appreciate, and want to preserve. Dr. David Bombaugh, retired professor of ministry at Meadville Lombard, and a colleague I served with on some committees, put the foreword in the book. And he wrote, "In this book, my friend and colleague Bill Murry invites those of us who have thought of ourselves as religious humanists or who have been intrigued by religious humanism to explore the underlying assumptions of that vision. With a deep appreciation for the religious and intellectual history in which we are rooted, Dr. Murry calls us to an honest and open evaluation of the strengths and weaknesses of traditional religious humanism. In exploring its rich and often neglected potential, he argues that an enlarged humanism is able to engage the issues and needs of our times with honesty and integrity. He challenges us to recognize the self-imposed limitations that have prevented humanists from fully engaging the spiritual yearnings of contemporary society and thus muted the humanist witness." I agree, and I think this is most unfortunate. I remember when I told someone that I was going to take this course on religious humanism that this person looked puzzled and said, "That's an oxymoron, isn't it?" It was one of those comments that you get on your way out the door and you need a short explanation. So in a few sentences, I explained that the religious humanism that is so important in our tradition reflects reverence for life and our belief in the worth and value of every human being. This he could only affirm, and he seemed to acknowledge the legitimacy of the word religion in that context. I was glad to see a reclaiming of the religious humanism of our tradition happening at Meadville Lombard among some of the professors. Murry writes, "Religious humanism is a life stance that exults in being alive in this unimaginably vast and breathtakingly beautiful universe, and that finds joy and satisfaction in contributing to human betterment." Without a creed, but with an emphasis on reason, compassion, community, nature, and social responsibility, it is a way of living that answers the religious and spiritual needs of people today. The emerging religious humanism is informed by a cultural development and recent discoveries in the natural and human sciences and grounded in the larger context of religious naturalism. So humanism is this really big umbrella, and some people want to put identifying adjectives in front of it. Christian humanist, Jewish humanist, religious humanist, or secular humanist. When a neighbor asked Murry what it meant to be a humanist, he replied that humanism refers to the affirmation of the worth and dignity of every person, a commitment to human betterment, and the necessity for human beings to take responsibility for themselves and the world. The neighbor said, "Sounds like I'm a humanist too." In the same conversation, Murry talked about the difference between the secular humanist and the religious humanist, saying that religious humanism emphasizes the importance of communities that affirm, support, and encourage these values through preaching, teaching, caring for one another, and celebrating life and life's passages together. Secular humanism does not. Moreover, he continues, religious humanism has a different feel or quality than secular humanism because it is more open to mystery and more likely to respond with reverence and gratitude at the wonder of being alive. And that doesn't mean that people who identify themselves as secular humanists don't have those feelings. And it also doesn't mean that people who identify as humanists can have absolutely no sense of God, because there's a lot of different ways of interpreting or understanding or just defining God in our lives. The religious humanism of our past has been influenced by scientific and technological discoveries, by a response to current realities in our culture, and developments in theological thought, including feminist and earth-centered possibilities and philosophies. Murry refers to a perspective that he embraced later in life that he called humanistic religious naturalism, a position that acknowledges the threat to life as we know it on this planet. So here's what Murry had to say about that. The damage to our natural environment caused by modern life has awakened our awareness that unless we change our thinking and actions, life as we know it on this fragile planet will not survive indefinitely. trusteeship in reverence for life applied to the natural environment. Important. Its primary ethical principle is responsibility, and while he claims a non-theistic stance, others have a sense of religious naturalism as a theistic way of thinking, but a non-traditional way, making it a very inclusive theological perspective. From the God of the Hebrews and then from Christianity, Murry explains that we inherited an emphasis on humanity and therefore a neglect of the sacred dimension of nature. Because of the way the word dominion over the earth was interpreted, there was an exploitation of the environment. And Murry points out that the holy was to be found in that kind of history only in human actions, human history, and in the supernatural. And this has not been the case in the way that Unitarian Universalists have thought. We have been informed not only by the humanist tradition, but also by the transcendentalists and by feminist theology and a number of different ways to access information and a sense of commitment and connection. So with our roots strongly in the Hebrew and Christian teachings, we have moved through transcendentalism, humanism, feminist theology, earth-centered spirituality. And now it seems time in our movement to pause and to look for a place of integrating all of these separate ways of thinking so that we can embrace a holistic religious outlook that empowers us to work from the deepest core of our being, our ethical and spiritual center, in a way that maintains just the right amount of tension on the web, the amount of tension it takes to sustain a web. And I wanted to share this reading with you from Peter Sampson. Peter Sampson was the first minister, not the first minister, but he was minister of the Unitarian Church in San Diego when it was a Unitarian church in San Diego, which is the church that I grew up in. He was there, I think, right before my family went there. So John Ruskin Clark was the minister there. But when I read this, I realized that this religious humanism is deeply embedded in the culture of the church that I grew up in. He wrote, "Yes, humanism can be religious. Indeed, the most meaningful and livable kind of humanism is itself a religious way of understanding and living life. It offers a view of people and their place in the universe that is a religious philosophy, overarching and undergirding it all. There can be a haunting sense of wonder, which never leaves one, for whom life itself is a mystery and miracle. Where did we come from? Why are we here? Where are we going with all the effort, frustration, the grief, the joy? To be caught up in this sense of wider relatedness, to sense our being connected in live ways with all the world and everyone in it, is the heart dimension of religion, whatever its name." I think those are words I'd like to just post somewhere. So may we enter this space always with a sense of reverence for life, never forgetting that we are guided by reason, and allow ourselves to be in awe of the beauty of it all. Thank you. I invite you now to join in reading number 646, The Larger Circle. We'll do it responsively, and I'll start. We clasp the hands of those that go before us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms. And the larger circle of others whose hands are joined in hand. And the larger circle of all creatures. Passing in and out of life, who will also dance. To a music so subtle and vast that no ears hear it. Except in reverence. And now I invite you to rise as your body or spirit allow as we sing together hymn number 121, and the words will be on the screen. Lean on me. And may we leave here with joy in our hearts, with an ability to accept and appreciate the world with awe and reverence. Go in peace.